But we've basically grown 50% per month since then.
I'm joined today by my friend Eric from Trigger, and we dig into the journey of Trigger across 4 versions.
Like the feedback we were getting was like, it's not working for some reason or another. It was a whole rewrite again.
Eric talks about how they discovered something that people really want.
That's really what's driven our growth, I think. We heard it like in the frequency and like the style of what was happening in our Discord and our Slack and our GitHub. Like, there is no better feeling in the world than shutting off a service like that.
So there's been 4 versions of Trigger, right? And
well, yeah, 3 major ones.
3 major ones.
The 4th one is really just like an evolution of the 3. The 4th one is more like, okay, now we're really doing just version numbers that don't break everything and rewrite everything. So yeah, it's 3 major versions.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still, it's an easier convention than like
yeah.
OpenAI's one or something. But
yeah.
You've got 4.
Yeah.
That's
right. Yeah,
there's 4 in Trigger. There's like V4, V3. I was part of the V3 wave, which I think a lot of people were.
Yeah.
And that's when I started using Trigger and found it to be really, really good. Do you want to take us back to like the evolution of how you got from like...
How far back do you want to go? I mean, like,
well, let's start with version. V1 Trigger.
So the first version, we kind of hit the Hacker News with a headline that was something like open source Zapier alternative for developers or something. And back then it was really about taking what Zapier was for like sales and marketing and stuff and try to bring it to developers. And what that was basically like, oh, you get integrations and you get like these kind of step-by-step workflows, and you just kind of define the inputs and where the outputs go and all, that kind of thing. And then everything just kind of runs, but either like on a schedule or, based on some event, webhook thing. And that was, it did really well on Hacker News. And it was really funny because around that time, it was like 3 days in a row, almost had like an open source Zapier alternatives.
Really?
And then by the 3rd one, people on Hacker News were like, what the heck is going on? Like, why are all these Zapier alternatives happening? And I was like, that's a good question. I would like to know that.
Do the others still exist, actually?
I don't know what the other, I think Windmill was one of the other ones, maybe, or I can't remember actually. Maybe they were just in our comment section. But yeah, so that was the first version, and that was, with the tech behind it was really only worked on like long running servers. So you had to have like a long running like node process running somewhere for it to work. And so we very quickly, this was during like YC, we launched that, and we sort of were talking to people during the batch and stuff, and we kind of quickly realized that, well, everyone was on serverless that wanted this, that wanted this problem, right? The other thing we realized was like it was sort of the back office versus like inside of your app like difference. Like, so Zapier is really like a back office tool. So you have things going through a sales pipeline, or you have like marketing, so things that like are behind the business but aren't like in the deep inside the applications, life cycle. And we were like, well, like this back office stuff, like the Zapier, the way they charge and things was you could get away with just being back office because if it's a sales pipeline, there's like an ROI there, right? So you could charge more for like one single run or one, actual thing for like a sales pipeline, because you could, like $1 spent on that equals like a $10,000 deal, right? Yeah. So, but for like developers and stuff that developers were doing, didn't make sense to be back office. So we wanted to be inside of an application. So we kind of and we wanted to be serverless. So we were like threw all that away, and we started in V2.
Were people using it? Well,
no, not really. I mean, people were trying it out, but like, because you needed a long running server, and like no one was running long running servers almost, or people that wanted our solution weren't running long running servers.
And that was like 2 months or something.
Yeah, it was about a month. It was like, we worked on it for like 4 months, and it was like live for like 2.
Okay.
But we even went down the route of like, no one had a long running server, so we were like building like a platform to run a long running server. It's a bit like, and then we kind of like, what are we doing? So we were like, well, let's come up with the like people on serverless want to do this stuff, right? And we also want it to be a bit more like inside of your application instead of a back office thing. So we came up with V2, And, what the constraints of serverless mean you're running on someone's serverless function, which is like Vercel or, Lambda or something. And so you actually don't have a long time to run a multi-step workflow.
Yeah. Because this could be something that takes minutes.
Yeah. It could be making like hundreds of API calls.
Yeah.
In sequence.
Yeah.
And so you can't do it in one run. So you have to break things up into like these reusable chunks, and then those are like cached. And then what you end up doing is like you have this whole sort of special syntax, not syntax, but it's written in like an SDK, right, to create these like deterministic chunks and like and then you wrap everything around. So like you can do these like multi-execution serverless function things that end up like pretending to run a piece of code like once, but really you're like running it hundreds of times and you're just doing like one step at a time, and then you're like out, and everything is like serialized. So like every step is like saved to, so you have to like save the output. So then when you rerun it, the output's there. And anyway, so it was this whole solution, and
that was V2.
That was V2.
Yeah.
And that was like I think we launched that, and then we kind of did we sort of did, it was like a, all right received, and then we did some big like co-marketing thing with Supabase because we had this like Supabase integration. So we still had integrations because, you're doing these steps and you have to like, each step you have to wrap in this code and all that stuff. And so we built these integrations to like make that easy, right? So like you do a call to like GitHub, and behind the scenes, it was doing all this wrapping and stuff. You would just have to do the call.
And what would be an example that someone was using it with Supabase?
Well, with Supabase was interesting because like Supabase was also on like the trigger side. So like you would, write into the Supabase database, and then it would trigger like one of our jobs, right? Yeah. Based on like the database event.
So like go send them like a welcome.
Yeah, like the canonical example is like you insert the user, and like the user signs up and Supabase just inserts, into the user table. And then you listen for that event in Trigger, and then it triggers a job, and then you send them like a multi-step email welcome flow thing, right? So that's like the canonical example. So that was one of the that sort of got us on the map. The V2 was on the map.
And people there were like
we had a decent amount of traction.
But it was all still open source completely. Right?
Yeah, it's all open source.
There was no. Did you have a SaaS at all at that time?
It was open source, and it was we almost have always like done cloud and open source in tandem. We sort of never done like we're just doing an open source thing and then we'll do the cloud later.
Yeah.
And we've always sort of done it at the same time. And I think that's probably because like, we're a startup and we're YC, so we're like trying to, build like a sustainable business, and the cloud is part of that. So we'd always had both of those things going in parallel.
Okay.
And definitely there were a lot of people who were using V2 like self-hosted. They were just running it themselves. It was not that hard to run. It was like Postgres and Docker, and that was about it. Okay. That was all you needed.
Yeah.
Because it was really just like orchestration.
Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. If things start going well, some of your customers are going to start asking for enterprise features. Things like audit trails, SSO, skim provisioning, role-based access control. These things are hard to build, and you could get stuck spending all your time doing that instead of actually making a great dev tool. That's why WorkOS exists. They help you with all of those enterprise features, and they're trusted by OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. And if you use them for user management, you get your first million monthly active users for free. I honestly don't know any dev tools that have 1 million monthly active users, apart from GitHub maybe. So that'll get you pretty far. Here's what Kyle from Depot has to say about WorkOS.
We use WorkOS to effectively add all of the SSO and skim to Depot. It's single-handedly like one of the best developer experiences I've ever seen for what is like a super painful problem if you were to go and try to roll that yourself. So for us, we can effectively offer SSO and skim, and it's like 2 clicks of a button, and we don't ever have to think about it. It's like one of the best features that we can add to Depot. It's super affordable, which effectively allows us to like break the SSO tax joke. and essentially say like you can have SSO and Skim as like an add-on onto your monthly plan. Like it's no problem. So it really allows smaller startups to essentially offer like that enterprise feature without a huge engineering investment behind it. Like it's literally, we can just use a tool behind the scenes and our life is exponentially easier.
So like V2 was doing well, but we had a Discord channel, we had Slack Connect channels with people who were like paying, and we were like constantly, basically like the feedback we were getting was like, it's not working for some reason or another. And so we'd constantly be like, it's not working. We would, try to fix things. And a lot of times what wasn't working was the code was written in a way where it wouldn't work, because you have to be very careful about the code you're writing in these types of systems, because you can easily get into a situation where you've written something non-deterministically and then everything breaks. The whole thing breaks, and it's very difficult to figure out why. Because you are continuously executing the same like function, the same code, right? And if anything changes, like by the 10th time you run it, before that like 10th step, if anything changes, the whole thing like breaks.
What would be like, have you got like a kind of example?
Yeah, like you're using a date, and that date is just like date.now. That would be enough to like break people's stuff.
Okay.
It's like, which is like a normal thing to do.
Yeah.
And because everything had to have these like cache keys. So you do a step and you have a cache key that's a string, which basically defines like that's the piece of work that will be reused, right? Yeah. And if you put anything in there that is like dynamic in any way, then you'll just keep doing that over and over again, because it hasn't seen that cache key before every execution. Yeah. And that would happen all the time.
Okay, right? So what you should have done with the date.now, you should have like...
You have to use cache. You'd have to do it inside of like one of those cache things, right? Because then it'll only run once. Or people were just like not putting code in those things, where they were just like putting code outside those things, and then it would run every single time. And
so it was like a different way to work.
And it was you had to change the way you kind of built code. You run, it wasn't like you couldn't take code from inside of your like request response handler thing, whatever you were using, right? Like you couldn't take it from your app router route. You couldn't take that code and like, oh, that's taking too long. I can't just take that code and put it over there. You'd have to rewrite the whole thing.
And I think that's the key thing as well, is like you're saying about app router, but you're like, these are kind of like Next.js devs. Like you're typically targeting like kind of.
They're hosted on Vercel. And I mean, background jobs, right? I guess the need, the like first need of a background job is I have stuff happening in request response cycle handler thing, right? And I need to get that out, because it's my user's sitting there waiting for the page to render and it's spinning. So that like that's like the canonical why you would need a background job. And so it wasn't a great story just to go put that code over there. Like, sorry, and it was like for good reason. Like you can't just take it and put it over there. Because over there is still a serverless function. Because we didn't run the code, we didn't host it. We just called into your existing function.
And so they were typically deploying on Vercel.
So we'd have like a /API/trigger endpoint, and we managed all that and stuff, right?
And then you'd be piecing together like Vercel functions.
If you sort of understood and you knew what you're doing, it would work really well. But then there's all these other like limitations, like this was a fun one actually. We very early on had this very strange bug. We couldn't understand what was going on. We're like, it's almost like because it was almost like a two-way thing where we would call into the serverless function, but then from there it would also like do API calls to us, right, to like save things and things like that, right? And we're like, it's almost like the post request to us is being cached on that side. We're like, that can't be what's happening. Like, there's no way like your a post is being cached. But we looked, very quickly after looking into it and figuring out like that's what was going on. It was like, yes, fetch, which Vercel patched in their functions, like by default cached post requests.
So we think it's already done it.
So it would be like, oh, I've already done that fetch. I've already done that post. So I'm not going to do it again. It was like, so we were like, oh yeah. So that's like a bug. No, it was actually by design they did that, but they have since fixed that. But I was like, I couldn't believe that. But so there's all sorts of little things like that. Like it's a compute thing that's like running over there.
Yeah.
And we're trying to orchestrate it, but there's all sorts of stuff that could be happening. Like, the request body limit is 4.5 megabytes, so if you're trying to like invoke it and you have all this cache data and it was over 4.5 megabytes, then now you have to do some other thing. So anyways, and we basically iterated on it a bunch. We did like try to fix everything we possibly could, and we were still running into issues. Yeah. And were issues that we like couldn't fix. Like we didn't have control, right? And then I did a tweet. I was like, I did a poll. I was like, when you're running when a Trigger.dev job is running, where do you think it's running? And I was like on Trigger.dev's cloud or, in your wherever hosted, wherever you're hosting your serverless function. It was like 55% thought we were running it. So I was like, oh. I was like, that's a problem. I was like, yes.
Because I think even like I still got a bit confused where, when I said to you V3 was open source or like you weren't running it. And I think I still, even now I got confused where like I knew that, sorry, V2. I knew that V3 was the one where suddenly you were running everything. So I'd kind of assumed that V2, because I hadn't used it, was actually just fully open source and it was just open source. But I think what you're saying is the code is hosted in V2 was hosted with Trigger, but like the actual the compute was running not on Trigger.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We would just call into the code. Like you would write Trigger.dev code, but that was just running in your serverless function.
Yeah.
And so we were like, we're kind of like, okay, maybe we should just run it, and then we'd have control. We'd be able to do, the whole stack ourselves and all that. So, so that was late 2023.
Yeah.
And that was, when we decided to to do,
so you went from basically like you're saving code in like database. Yeah. Like you're kind of like, in a sense, it's like you're managing JSON sort of in a sense.
Yeah. Managing JSON. Yeah. Basically that's all it was. Yeah.
And then suddenly V3 is like, you're running.
Yeah, we're running. We have to build it, and then we have to ship it, and then to us, and then we have to like queue it, execute it, and the whole shebang. So that was where I'm talking about the ignorance came in. It was good. It was good that we didn't know all the challenges. And we had just hired our first non-founder engineer. He was one of our open source contributors, and I think we wouldn't have been able to do it if we hadn't hired him, if we hadn't hired Nick, because he built the whole like execution side of things, and he was like a Linux nerd, like he has Linux on his laptop.
Very like side point, not to go down, but he's such a cool guy. But he was saying at the pub that he wouldn't have joined Trigger if he weren't open source.
Yeah, so I mean, it was good timing, basically. I think we probably wouldn't even considered it a possibility if he hadn't come on, because I don't think we would have wanted to like take on that whole challenge, So it was good timing when we were like, all right, let's just do it. But it was a whole rewrite again, because you can't, you don't need all that stuff that we were doing before, if you're actually just running the code. So now we say, you just run it until it finishes. Yeah. Like why have like a limit of how long? They'll just run until it's done, however long, whatever that takes. But like so we basically embarked on that in early 2023, and then we launched it and launched the first version in May 2024, something like that. It was a very quick schedule because in March, Defer, who was doing something similar, they were actually very, very similar to V3. They shut down, and they basically were like, by the end of the month, like we're finished. Like, and so we were like, let's get this finished so people can like jump over from defer to us.
Yeah.
And so we kind of rushed that last bit out to try to get like capture some of the people who needed somewhere to go. Because it was actually quite similar. They were doing the whole like building and running and all that sort of stuff. So although it was funny, it was a bit like they're shutting down, like right with like the same idea. So that was a bit we were kind of worried about that. But yeah, so we embarked on that. And then we launched like the proper cloud version of it, like probably later that year. I think August, September, somewhere around that of 2024. It's not that long ago, really. But yeah, it's completely rewrite, and now we run everything, and it's definitely been completely different since then, since that September.
So May was just the open source.
Yeah,
version.
it was sort of, it was like private beta.
Okay.
And it was open source, and it was also like the cloud was private beta.
Yeah.
And we learned a lot of things between then and like going live in September. And yeah, I mean, we're still learning stuff, but
and so V3 now is like people can essentially just write what feels very much like you're writing like
they can take the code that was just written over there
to
go from top to bottom and then stick it in like a task. We call them tasks now because we had to come up with a different name. We were like jobs now. We've done that one task. So now you just take it and put it in there.
Yeah.
And they could just run.
And it feels to me like it's like a Lambda function. It's like writing a Lambda function.
It's like a Lambda function. It's very similar to like a Lambda handler.
Yeah.
And we have like the, one big thing we sort of got rid of was the integration side from V2. We don't do integrations anymore. That was another thing we sort of learned was trying to do integrations in code is like you need like a massive team of people to be able to do that well. Because like everything changes all the time, and you have to keep up to date. I mean, we had our like most popular integration was the OpenAI one, and that they were just like always releasing new stuff.
Yeah.
So you'd have to day one be like, okay, all of a sudden now we have to stop what we're doing and like go update the OpenAI integration. And so like we were like, yeah, let's not do that. And we did this whole thing with webhooks and everything with V2. Where we would like completely manage the whole webhook lifecycle and like register them for you and like handle like the triggering side and all that sort of stuff. We got rid of that because we were like, that was, and again, like you'd have to have a team of people to do that well. And so we kind of like, one of the lessons we learned with V2 is like, don't try to do too much. Like we were trying to do like everything.
Yeah.
So we really simplified like V3 that took that chance to simplify and like only do, so you have to actually trigger a task like manually. So you can do that from wherever your back end, right?
Yeah.
So you can handle a webhook and trigger from that. Like you do it. Or use hook deck, and they'll do it and then that you can just call. So, use a tool who's actually made specifically for that. The only thing we have done is like the scheduling stuff. We kept that in because a lot of people would, have to have scheduling stuff in their back end or their background job. So we did keep that. But yeah, we simplified stuff and then we made it possible, I think, to build like a good product. With V2 it wasn't possible, I don't think. We couldn't have built what V2 was. Because we have these constraints. Like we're not going to be able to hire like 15 people to work on integrations. So we kind of like realized like, okay, let's build what is possibly good. And that's like focus. But yeah, you can just take code, slap it in, a task, and then it works. But we have these like, we have one little bit of like special sauce that we sort of built into the platform. And that is because a lot of times what you do want is like this idea of durable execution, right? Like, you want to be able to like do this task and then you give it an idempotency key and like it will only run once or something like that, right? For example. And we have these tasks and you can kind of have a tree of tasks. So you can like have one task trigger another task. But of course you want to know what the task did, what the other task did. So you trigger it and then you wait for the result. And you basically have to do that in like the traditional way of doing it is the way we're kind of doing before in V2, where you would have to write everything in this like deterministic sense where you would be able to go in back and like execute the task again, execute this like, function again, and have skip down until you get to the point where you just were. Like that's how you resume code. Like in like a traditional durable execution system is you have to do it deterministically. The other way is which we've done now, and this was completely driven off of like we sketched what we wanted the code to look like. Like we were like, this is what we want the code to look like for the user, and we were like, okay, how do we do it? Like how do we actually do that? Because like if you're in the middle of a JavaScript function, there's no way to like say, I want to actually close, like I want to stop this process and resume it from that part of the function. You can't do it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what we wanted. We wanted to be like, why can't we just like call a function again and say start from that point? Like start from line 10.
And that's because something would take age, like you want to restart it.
Yeah, but you're triggering another task and that might take a while.
Yeah.
So we don't want to actually spend this CPU, the process of waiting for this other thing.
Well, like I saw you had an example where like you want like Slack approval, like moderation or something like that.
Or it could be something that indeterministically
it interrupts it.
It might take
wait till
a week.
Eric approves it.
Yeah.
And then restart from
right. Yeah, you restart from there. But you obviously you don't want the compute running for a week just to wait.
Yeah.
And so really what we wanted was we wanted to be able to like call a function in JavaScript and say start on line 10.
Yeah.
Of your but you can't do that obviously. Like this it doesn't exist. So how you do it is to start on line 10 is you have the previous lines 1 through 9 be cached.
Yeah.
Right. And that's that whole thing we were doing in V2. And we were like, well, we can't do that.
Yeah.
And so how do we do it? How do we actually do that? How do we get it to resume on line 10? And so what we built was like this, which is completely hidden from the user, but we do it all in the background, is we actually do like a process. We take a snapshot of the entire process. We save that off to like storage. And then it basically freezes like the memory and everything that's happening in the process, like into like disk.
Yeah.
And then you rehydrate that from disk. And then it basically like, it's like the process never exited. It's like, so the process just comes back on line 10.
Yeah.
And so we're using this like technology called CRIU for that.
CRIU,
like CRIU. It's a acronym. It stands for like something, I forget, checkpoint something in user space or something. Yeah. So anyways, it's this like Linux thing. And yeah, so we're doing all that like in the background.
Damn, that's cool.
And that's what allows you to do, line 10.
Yeah.
So the code you write the code normally, but it doesn't run normally.
Yeah.
And so we're, that's the sort of like the only thing we sort of added that wasn't like just a normal code running from start to finish.
Super cool.
Yeah.
And then how was the reception of V3 compared to V2?
Yeah, a lot different. I would say maybe like 2 orders of magnitude better than
two
V2.
orders of magnitude. 100 times better.
Like we're basically, since we launched so we launched it in like where you could pay for the cloud, usage based like cloud stuff, in September, I think. It was maybe it was August or something like that. But we've basically grown 50% per month since then.
That's insane. I wasn't sure you were going to say that on the show.
Yeah.
You told me that.
No, I can
That's
say that.
crazy.
I can say that.
I think what on YC say the minimum is like 16 or something.
I think it's like 7% per week is like really good. 7% per week is really good. So that's what we shoot for.
7% per week is what per month? Like
I think it's like 30 or something.
Okay, and you're at 50.
Yeah. That's good. So and every month we're like, we can't grow 50% again. Like that's not going to happen, right? So obviously some months are like more than others, but that's been our like
and that's
average.
Revenue.
Yeah, revenue.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's and obviously because people have like they want to run compute for all sorts of different reasons. And if you give them the platform to just run it for however, like you just take away that worry.
Yeah.
And also what we ended up doing was we didn't even think about this, I guess, but when we did V3, we kind of built this instead of it being like a Node.js only thing. It's an image, like you get a Docker image, right? And you can customize it and stuff. So you run Node, right? It's like, it is Node, but then you can run Python or Go, or you can, shell out to FFmpeg, or you can install, LibreOffice and, like parse a PDF or something like that. So a lot of people ended up coming and like installing these like custom packages and doing stuff. You can't, like, it's really hard. You can do that stuff on Lambda, like it's tricky, but you can sort of do it. But in a lot of other serverless platforms, right, you wouldn't be able to do that. And so you do have this like full actual like compute platform. We can do all sorts of stuff. And it actually, what I mean by we didn't really think about it was, of course, like a background job platform, like particularly needs that kind of thing, right? Because that's where you're not going to be doing like a FFmpeg encoding job in a request response cycle. Yeah. So that kind of was, it was like the way we architected it meant we could do that fairly easily. And then that's really what's driven our growth, I think, is that full platform ability. And then the fact that you can sort of break things out into these like subtasks and things where you can do things idempotently. So you can sort of like, that's a way to basically save money, right? So you're not doing work unnecessarily, but you're also saving money on the other side where you're triggering something and waiting it to finish, and that thing isn't running either. So yeah, it's like it's I guess economical from that perspective. So yeah, V3 has been definitely a different feeling, and you can sort of just tell, like you can feel it, like the amount of people like trying it and like giving you feedback, and the amount of people like in your GitHub or in your Discord or in your Slack.
Your Discord is very active,
and they're just, and the amount of time it takes, like some people would just like come on the platform and like we never talk to them, and then they're like using the cloud like crazy, like and we've never even talked to them, like, and they're just kind of getting on with it, and running massive workloads, which it's definitely a different feeling from V2.
Yeah, is it? I feel like there is something where like it's kind of, obviously you want to be good at marketing and everything like that, but like I feel like there is some, like, you probably aren't 2 orders of magnitude better at marketing when you did V3.
No, yeah, that's true. That is for sure.
It's like, there is something where it's like,
I mean, the YC advice, like make something people want, right? So we kept hearing what people wanted, and you don't hear it like directly. Yeah, it's not like no one sort of came in when we were doing V2 and said like it just spelled out what V3 was, right? But we heard it like in the frequency and like the style of what was happening in our Discord and our Slack and our GitHub. Like that's sort of like you're talking to them, not necessarily about like we did do the whole like mom test interview things. We would talk to people and be like, what are you doing? Like, what do you need? Like that is useful, right? But I think when you hear from like for 6 months from people about all these problems, and then you sort of like, okay, actually if we sort of did that, maybe it would solve like most people's problems in this way. Yeah. And like it wasn't like everyone was like super happy about V3. Like a lot of people, V2 people weren't happy because they liked that model. Yeah. People who were getting on with V2 were like happy with how that was working. But we were like, well, that like it is great when it's working for you and you understand how to do it and all that stuff. But it was like to get to that next step, like it wasn't gonna. That was the model that didn't work. And so like a lot of people, and luckily like there's a few people out there who are doing that style of thing. So it was like they could go and like Cloudflare Workers has one, and Upstash and Ingest, they all have that model. And so, if you want that model, it wasn't like we were the only thing doing that. So that was good. And we did give people like 6 months. We were basically had like a deprecation of 6 months on our cloud. Obviously you can still self-host it, and people are doing that currently. But we gave people like plenty of time to either like migrate to something else or go to V3 or something.
Yeah, that's actually like, do you have any advice on like when you are doing big changes and you kind of like...
Well, yeah, it's interesting right now with like big changes because I think you really have to be careful about big changes now because of LLMs. Like we didn't foresee the problems of V2 to V3 from that perspective. Because I think back then, I mean, that's not even that long ago, but obviously late 2023, right? People were still reading docs. There was no cursor, like no one was vibe coding. But now, like no one reads docs. Like, why would you, right? Like like the AI reads the docs for you, right? Maybe. And then you just use the AI to write code. And so we didn't really foresee that. So I'd be really careful about like making huge changes now. Like, I guess we're lucky because we have something that works now, so we probably won't be making big changes. But if that happened, like later, we would really struggle, I think. And we still struggle to this day with people like coming in with V2.
That's right. Like, why doesn't this work? And it's like V2.
I mean, this happened the other day. Like a guy just was vibe coding and was like using all sorts of stuff from V2, and then also stuff that never existed.
Yeah,
it was just like a hallucinated like package that we never even had, and he was trying to get to work, and I was like, well, that package doesn't exist. Like, because we're like an open source dev tool, I think we were really careful about like we weren't going to just shut V2 down on the cloud and be like, you guys are screwed, right? Because one, like we've been in that situation before, and you never want to have like a couple weeks to do something or your business it's going to be completely messed up. So we were like 6 months. Actually, I think it was slightly longer than 6 months, but it was like
advertised 6 months.
And it was supposed to be January 31st of like 2025, but of course, like I think we ran it for another like 2 months after that, just because we had a few people who were still like migrating and we weren't going to just shut it off. But I'll tell you what, there is no better feeling in the world than shutting off a service like that and deleting the code.
Yeah.
That was amazing. But yeah, I would say, one thing we did really early was actually create like an LLM thing.
Yeah.
So we were like, put this into the LLM and like it will migrate the code for you to like V3.
Yeah.
So that a lot of people found that useful. Now you'd probably do that with like an MCP server or something, but yeah, I think we just being really careful about like the community and making sure that like people weren't like in a bad place, and we were like getting on calls with people and like migrating them over manually, and they were in our Slack and we were helping them. Yeah. So
we're coming towards the end, Eric. So just, I don't know if you want to just talk about very briefly touch on V4 and the future.
V4. So it's just like we've rewritten the engine, what we call like the run engine, and not much from a user perspective is changing. Other than now we basically have made that whole thing where you can kind of wait for other stuff to happen and then resume, and it was a bit hard coded and it wasn't very extensible and stuff before, and we've rewritten the engine to basically make that programmable, like that so you can almost like programmatically now like stop where you want, and that's the whole like human in the loop thing where you can stop it and then be like you can manually resume from somewhere else based on like a Slack approval or something, or like an agent running and it does something.
That's so cool. I really love that. I think people should. It's just really cool when I saw you demo that, where it's like just here's an image someone created, approve it, or
and so you can do it through anything, right? You could have maybe like a lot of people have these other things running, like this pool of compute that's running and maybe doing something, right? And they can throw like the token. We have these like tokens that you can use, and so you throw the token to the other system, and then when you want the Trigger.dev workflow to resume, you use the token to like resume it. We call those wait points, and so now that's programmed like very extensible programmatic, and so that's going to unlock a whole new set of use cases. And so that's like really the V4 in a nutshell is that. And we've made some improvements for like agents, like when people are running, like almost everyone is running the AI SDK inside of their tasks in some way. And so we made a lot of improvements around that. And you can like stream what's happening in the LLM straight to like your front end. If it's happening in the background, you can stream it. And then we've also added some, like basically that's from your background job, right, to your front end. And that we've also added a thing where you can kind of like interrupt. You can like stop the LLM from running. So it's like that two-way sort of communication with the LLM that's running in the background. Because obviously, you know, you're using like a agent and you want to stop it.
Yeah.
So, and so, yeah, we've made all that better. We've made the like observability of all the AI stuff that's happening is much better. And generally made it a better tool for like easily wrapping your tasks to provide them to LLMs. And we have better Python support, so you can run like Python. What a lot of people like the agent stuff in Python is a little bit more advanced than in JavaScript. So like a lot of people want to run agents in Python and then like coordinate it and everything. So the Python stuff is a bit better. So yeah, lots of little things that we were like,
Fire alarm. Okay. We once had a tsunami warning. I think we were interviewing Jake from Railway. We got a tsunami warning
here
in San Francisco.
No,
that was. I say we.
Okay, I was like, say what?
Yeah, no,
it's like the
that would be
Thames
bad. Yeah, that was Jake from Railway. That was
oh my god.
Warning. Okay.
Didn't happen though.
Okay. No, and he was just like, "Oh, interesting," and it just carried on. He's like Jake's committed to to building B2B SaaS.
Nice, yeah.
He's going down. Like he was like, "I'm gonna go down."
I love the tweets where it's like, like a planet has been discovered with life or something. Like, oh, now we have a whole new cohort to sell our B2B SaaS to or something.
I feel like it must be either James from PostHog, or like he's just taken that whole like anything joking.
The quick call. Yeah.
So if people want to check out Trigger.dev,
it's in the name. Yeah,
it's in the name.
Yeah.
Eric, thank you so much. I was so glad to finally, we did one episode, but this was the real Trigger one.
Yeah, no.
You were always like, can we do an actual one rather than just talking about open source?
I mean, that was fun too. Yeah. I was geeking out about open source licenses. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for having me.